We are looking at $3.61 per gallon. That is an average.
All 74 buses are enabled with bidirectional charging.
We allow them to continue what they're doing, to flood the market with EVs that are incredibly cheap. They're not making any money on them, deliberately doing it to put other people out of business.
And what was noticeably missing, Oliver, was the goal of delivering 20 million vehicles per year by the year 2030.
All that and more. So let's get to it. At the closing bell on Friday, Tesla ended up a little over 3%, down a little bit in the after hours, sitting at 178.77. Another roller coaster ride for the week, a little over 0.5% gain, pretty much trading flat for the week. And year to date, Tesla is down 28.5%. What does the rest of the year have in store for TSLA?
The long weekend just about here, if it hasn't started for you already. AAA is projecting that over 43 million Americans will be traveling a distance of over 50 miles over the next few days, most of whom will be driving. Here to let you know what to expect at the pump this weekend, we've got our very own Inez Ferre. Hey, Inez.
And simply put, well, prices have been declining over the last month when we talk about gasoline prices. Let's take a look at where we're at with the average today. We are looking at $3.61 per gallon. That is an average, because in other places you are seeing prices a little bit higher, a little bit lower than that. But look, from a month ago, prices are down about 5 cents. From a year ago, they are up about 5 cents on average.
Oh, gas prices. Gotta say, I don't miss it. Won't you join me?
This is a really interesting development. In fact, a lot of our audience will be probably surprised that it's taken to this point to have the first school district all-electric fleet. Just explain the deal that you've done with Oakland.
Thank you, Ed, for having me. I'm excited to be here. So electric school bus is having a moment right now. Oakland Unified will be the first major school district in the country to be 100% electric. And we have enabled this by a few things. First, there is a tremendous support of the grants, including the Clean School Bus Initiative Act and the local level grants that are available in accelerating the energy transition. And the second thing very unique about this is that all 74 buses are enabled with bidirectional charging, plugged into our V2G platform, can supply energy back to the grid when these buses are not used for transportation, which is typically in the evenings and summer, which is also a peak demand of energy. So it is pretty amazing, given the Oakland community is really affected by the poor quality of air and the asthma rates. This is a tremendous opportunity.
Kudos to Zoom. That's the name of the game, people. Accelerating the transition to a sustainable energy economy. Great start in Oakland, but we still got a lot of work to do.
Tesla CEO Elon Musk says he opposes U.S. tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. Yahoo Finance spoke exclusively with President Biden after the announcement to raise the tariff from 25% to 100%, and this is what POTUS had to say.
If we allow them to continue what they're doing, to flood the market with EVs that are incredibly cheap, they're not making any money on them, deliberately doing it to put other people out of business.
It is rather odd, the market over there in China, they continue to lower their prices even though they're not making any money off of their battery electric vehicles. Even with heavy support from the Chinese government, only the strong will survive. In China or anywhere else in the world, the consumers will decide which products that they want to buy. Price is just one factor. It's a big factor, but it's only one factor when it comes to consumer preference. Sustainability is the name of the game in more ways than one. What the Chinese OEMs are doing is simply unsustainable for the long term. It will be interesting to see how this plays out in the years to come.
Comments from Elon Musk came at a tech conference conference over in Paris. And specifically, he said he was surprised when the U.S. made this announcement, saying that things that inhibit freedom of exchange or distort the market are not good. Now, it marked a bit of a shift in tone from Musk's comments back in January. Remember, back then, he argued that tariffs were necessary, saying that without them, Chinese car makers would demolish, in his words, most other car companies in the world.
Well, Akiko, two things can be true at the same time. If you missed the Vivitech interview, I've got the highlights and the supercut right about here. It'll also be a card at the end of the video, but you can look at these tariffs from multiple angles. Deterring the Chinese from putting their battery electric vehicles over here at that extremely low price point does nothing for the accelerating of the transitioning to a sustainable energy economy. But what it does do is allow those that are making passenger vehicles in those segments to continue selling their hybrids, their internal combustion engines, and to a much lesser extent, battery electric vehicles. These tariffs not only stymie the natural selection process for the consumer, but also the growth of the EV adoption at large. Exposure to this Chinese competition will be catastrophic for most auto manufacturers, but from that adversity will emerge the best of the best.
All of this stems from concerns about cheap Chinese vehicles flooding global markets, squeezing out competitors. While China does remain the largest EV market, Chinese car makers have increasingly been making pushes into new countries as their home market slows down, and they've been making inroads, particularly in Europe. They increased their market share over in the EU to 20% of the European EV market last year. That was up from 16% the previous year. And they did that largely by price, with Chinese car makers commanding a 30% cost advantage over European rivals.
God damn, that's a huge cost advantage. Does the EU follow suit and go 100% like the US? If you want to save your domestic auto manufacturers, you're damn right you do. But if transitioning to a sustainable energy economy is your goal, you may be of a different opinion.
Now you've got the European Commission considering tariffs on Chinese car imports that by some estimates can range from 15 to 20%. The Rhodium Group put out a study estimating that tariffs would need to be as high as 55% to curb imports. And the concern is something similar could happen here in the U.S. as well.
What? These tariffs are a means to allow our U.S. legacy auto manufacturers to catch up, establish supply chains, reduce the cost of this manufacturing process. You will not be able to keep these Chinese brands from our shores for very much longer. You either figure it out or you sell internal combustion engines and hybrids until they're no longer needed. And after a certain point in time, these U.S. automotive manufacturers will fade away, much like Kodak and Blockbuster did. You remember those companies that didn't want to evolve? Yeah, history has a way of repeating itself.
Elon Musk saying he doesn't necessarily want tariffs. That's something we've heard from other car CEOs as well. Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares saying that tariffs aren't necessarily the answer because car makers compete in a global market. Just a few days ago, he was interviewed by Reuters saying that he believes these tariffs are, in his words, a major trap for the countries that go on that path, and that ultimately Western car makers will need to find a way to restructure to be able to meet the challenge from lower cost Chinese manufacturers. Specifically, Tavares said when you fight against the competition to absorb 30% of cost competitiveness edge in favor of the Chinese, there are social consequences. The bottom line is this, guys, when you think about what Chinese cars or Chinese EVs are selling for, you've got a price tag of roughly $10,000 if you look at something like BYD's Seagull. Even with the tariffs, they can still be cost competitive. So that's exactly what those, like Elon Musk potentially, but especially Stellantis, the CEO, has been hitting on, saying you've got to have a restructuring, really rethink about how these car companies are structured, because the Chinese car makers are going to continue to make a push into new markets. They will have to go head to head with them at these very low price points, regardless of where those tariffs land.
Ding, 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 ding. Tell her what she's won, Johnny. Your mother. Right. These auto manufacturers can't rely on the US government or any other government for tariffs against the Chinese. You're competing globally. You're already in the ring with these motherfuckers.
All right, we got Tesla cutting production. We need to take us through the story.
The company is finally addressing that weakening demand that we've seen for several quarters that it didn't seem like the company wanted to admit about, certainly not Elon Musk. But right now they're addressing the demand that's weakening for the Model Y. Tesla's reportedly planning to cut the Model Y production at its biggest manufacturing hub globally. That's the Shanghai plant. They're planning to cut production by at least 20% during the March to June quarter at that plant. And industry data backs up that this is likely in the works already, because the China Association of Automobile Manufacturers showed that the Model Y output in China was at around 49,500, very close to that number in March. That was about 18% lower, right? And then in April, it came in about 33% lower.
Elon and the team already said that there will be less production than there was in 2023. What they failed to mention, and what many of the news media analysts are speculating about, is why. Now, the low-hanging fruit is to grab at the demand. Oh no, the best-selling vehicle in the year of 2023 is now having its vehicle production cut. It must be a demand issue, right? Well, I posit, maybe, just maybe, we've had a refresh of the Model 3. The Model 3 shares around 70% of its parts with the Model Y. In order to incorporate the refresh and the various technology that is involved with the Model 3, its production too was cut. I wonder how the Model 3 Highland has been doing as of late.
Now, we're not sure if the output cut will extend into the second half of this year, but we know that Tesla still plans on selling up to 700,000 vehicles in China in total this full year, so they haven't adjusted that full year outlook for the output yet, right? And they're also planning on selling 2 million EVs globally this year. We haven't heard anything telling us anything otherwise right now. And of course, as I said, it's addressing the weakening demand. Why has this been happening? Because it's been a brutal price war in China happening among the 300 or so EV makers. We know that the government has been trying to consolidate them, but all of these EV makers are flooding the market with cheap vehicles, and it makes it difficult for Tesla to still maintain its priority position, you know, even though it's still up there and it still has the largest, but they've got a lot of different vehicle makers coming for Tesla's market share.
As the Chinese government is finding out, it's not about quantity, it'll be about quality. Tesla is still competing with all of these Chinese EV manufacturers quite well, mind you, and they're not even in the cheaper segment that many of these EVs are playing in. At a loss, mind you. What happens when they figure out the next generation platform and cutting the cost by anywhere between 40 and 50%?
Now, meanwhile, Tesla did also release its latest impact report yesterday. And what was noticeably missing, Oliver, was the goal of delivering 20 million vehicles per year by the year 2030. That's a tall order right now, because Tesla hasn't even broken a million yet. And so this is just something that'll continue to be on our radar, and the year 2030 is really closer than we think.
More than likely, a question to be answered at the annual shareholders meeting, possibly? Who knows? Maybe that the 20 million goal is a little bit lofty at this stage of the game. But by 2030, I do believe they'll be the largest automobile manufacturer on the planet. So if they don't hit 20 million by 2030, I guess we'll just have to settle for that. In conclusion, happy travels for the Memorial Day weekend. May this be the last Memorial Day weekend that you have to rely on gas. Thanks to Zoom, the US now has its first fully electric school bus fleet, 74 electric buses from Zoom to an Oakland school district. When Elon Musk speaks, the world tends to listen. Tariffs on Chinese EVs may protect the legacy auto manufacturers for a little while, but ultimately it just stymies the transition to a sustainable energy economy. And demand for the Tesla Model Y has finally reached its peak, right? It was a good run, Tesla. Go ahead and pack up all your shit from China and Berlin and Austin. Shutter your doors. Nobody wants these things anymore. Oh. Wait, you're not going to close up shop? Demand is right where you want it, and you have a product roadmap that's going to extend your total addressable market? Oop. My mistake. That's all I've got for you today. Be easy. Peace.